just need to be a neuroscientist, physician, and then astronaut. Boom, it's done. So it's like as early as high school, I was like, I'm just going to go study neuroscience. I'm going to be a neurosurgeon, and then I'll be an astronaut, right?
Principle of lifting as you climb is so true. And really the naysayers are those, and I used to believe this was a cliche, but really the naysayers by and large are people that are projecting their own doubts.
Mm-hmm. The ability to see a path and not question it and just take it for face value and go do it, right? You're not then succumbing to the drama of so-and-so thinks I can, or I think I can.
But basically it's that ability to bounce back when things get tough, or even keep going when things are going well, and just maintaining that endurance.
Okay, Dinesh, what do nematodes, sea survival training, TEDx talks, the recent Chandrayaan-3 moon landing, and Taekwondo have in common?
I don't know what a nematode is. What's a nematode?
Well, maybe our guest today can tell you what a nematode is. She is an absolute, literal, out of this world, amazing person. And I'm so excited she's here. Today we have Dr. Shawna Pandya, she's a physician, an aquanaut, a director of space, director of the Space Medical Group for the International Institute for the Astronautical Sciences. As you can probably guess, she's also a TEDx speaker. She's a martial artist, an advanced diver, a skydiver, a pilot in training. And can I add one more crazy thing to this list? As if it's not like amazing enough. Take a guess.
She has been to space.
Okay. We'll see if that's true or not, because my 9-year-old daughter definitely wants to know the answer to this. But she's lived underwater. Like, if that's a thing, I don't, 11 days, 10 nights underwater. So, Dr. Shawna Pandya, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be so much fun.
So amazing. And not only that, there's one more thing that I recently learned is that you're also an entrepreneur and you work with a number of medical device companies, food companies as an advisor. So, wow. Welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you here. We're excited to have this conversation. And there are no ceilings, ladies and gentlemen, as evidenced by our guest here, right?
No. And then the other thing just popped into my head. Shawna, you're a model as well.
Yeah, former model. That's stuff I've done.
Just in a normal day, no big deal.
Do you not walk down the runway in your flight suit? Is that normal?
Not yet. With a few more episodes of the Happy and Human podcast, we too will want to walk down the runway with our flight suits. Let's get into it.
Let's dive in.
Ladies and gentlemen, you should know that before we actually start recording, we spend about 30 minutes or so just yucking it up and having a great conversation. So if our intro into the episode seems like, wait a second, like they're just being way too casual and way too funny with each other, it's because, we're coming off of 20, 30 minutes of yucking it up. But we do have a great episode. And Seema is going to start us off with some really insightful questions into everything that is Dr. Shawna Pandya.
Yes. Okay. So Shawna, let's answer that question for Monsi first. First of all, my kids wanted to know, what is an aquanaut? And I told them to go Google it. And then the next question is, have you actually been to space? That one's from my 9-year-old daughter.
Yeah, those are great questions. So an aquanaut is someone who has spent time in saturation. So basically, once you've been underwater for a certain amount of time and you have the gases at depth, the nitrogen bubbles have dissolved. So for 24 hours, they've dissolved into your bloodstream. You're said to be at saturation. You can take on no more gas in your body, and then that means you're going to absorb all the nitrogen you're going to absorb, and then that means whether you live underwater for 24 hours or for 3 months, it's all the same because you're at max capacity. And what that means for surfacing, getting really nerdy here, is that you have to ascend at a set rate. So you can let all that gas blow off so you don't have a dive injury. You don't have bubbles come out too quickly and lodge in bad places like your brain or your heart.
Can you
Yeah,
explode? Can you explode if you go from the bottom with all the nitrogen all the way to the top really quickly?
you can't explode, but basically, if those bubbles go into your joints, they'll hurt. And if
Oh,
they go into your brain, they can cause seizures, coma, or death, which we don't like. So
Yeah.
don't do that.
yeah, all bad stuff. All bad stuff.
Yeah. Take it from this MD. It's suboptimal when that happens. So the follow up is I haven't been to space yet, but stay tuned. So I'll kind of leave you on a cliffhanger to start with.
Dun, dun, dun.
I love it.
And I know my 12-year-old's going to ask, how do you go to the bathroom underwater?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's actually, when we talk about being in an extreme environment or an analog environment, so the reason we do all of these things, the reason, I'll go on aquanaut expeditions or I'll go on a Mars simulation mission is that they're analogous in some way to the spaceflight environment. They help us prepare for space. So maybe they're resource limited, maybe they're remote. Maybe, they replicate some aspect of the spaceflight environment. So they're analogous. So we call them analog environments. So when I refer to my time underwater, I've done 2 aquanaut missions, NEPTUNE and then NEPTUNE with a 2 in the middle. We thought the name was great when we came up with it, but it's kind of confusing. So everything in space and exploration is an acronym. So NEPTUNE stands for Nautical Experiments in Physiology, Technology, and Underwater Exploration.
Wow.
And I did my first mission in 2019 for 5 days at the Jules Undersea Lodge, and then for 6 days in May of last year. And you're in this literal research and living and working habitat underwater, and it actually you have a toilet. It's kind of like a flush toilet with its own special pump. So you're actually in a dry environment. So you dive down. You have to have all your scuba diving gear to go underwater, and then you surface. You kind of swim into the habitat from underneath, and then there's something called a moon pool, which you surface from, and then there's a wet porch, and that's where you stage your dive gear. So then you take it all off, and then the difference is you are at pressure. You're at increased pressure compared to the surface, and when you're at 20 feet underwater, like the Jules Undersea Lodges, you're at 1.6 atmosphere, which is actually really cool. I think your kids would love this. Is that you don't think it's that much of a difference in pressure, but when you bring down marshmallows with you, they scrunch up.
Wow.
When you bring down your foam slippers, they scrunch up. So it actually has implications for everything from marshmallows to your physiology. So you actually don't. We had a nice toilet that was better, way better than an outhouse. We had a nice shower and running water. We couldn't cook because having an open flame or a fire in the hab is also considered suboptimal. So it had impacts for how we prepared food, for example. And interestingly enough, this is anecdotal. We did notice at pressure that we had to go to the bathroom more, for example, and there were those impacts. So I hope that answers your 12-year-old's question.
Oh, I'm sure it will. He's going to be thrilled to know that I actually asked the question.
So I have a question about that.
Yeah.
We're in the Northeast and you're in Canada, and
Yeah.
I should say the Northern Hemisphere, not the Northeast, and it's winter here. And with the shortened days, there's seasonal affect disorder and,
Yes.
light. Dr. Huberman talks about light, and Dr. Amy Shah, Fasting MD, talks about sort of circadian rhythm and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you're underwater and you can't see the sun, what accommodations do you do to ensure that you're going to bed at a time where you can sleep and waking up at a time that roughly resembles some sort of circadian rhythm?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're lucky that at 20 feet of depth that the sunlight would still filter through. So you can definitely tell when it's daylight. You have it's at the outside, you have these windows in your habitat, and you can see the fish and the crabs and the lobsters all swim by. And then
nematodes too. Can you see nematodes?
No, because that would imply our nematodes got loose and we would be in trouble. It has all the makings of a science fiction horror movie.
I was going to say that. I was going to say, when you were describing like the wet porch and everything, I was going to be like, that seems like a movie that I've seen somewhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, like probably, in some Hollywood version, like a giant squid arises from the depths and then, creeps up on your wet porch. I mean, I have so many questions about the scientific basis of that. So basically, coming back to the question about sunlight, your options looking at the window are murky green during the day, but it's actually quite beautiful, and then pitch black at night. And so what's really cool is the commander from those missions, Commander Joe Dituri. He was commander on both those missions, but he also actually at the same time had set the world record this past year for most days underwater. He spent 100 days underwater, and so he studied his sleep. And it wasn't just the circadian rhythms. He very much said he missed seeing the sunset. He missed, that aspect. He missed skydiving. But in terms of circadian rhythm, for 6 days, you're doing so much. You're doing dives, you're working, you're doing science. By the time 10 p.m. rolls around, by the time midnight rolls around, you're ready for bed. And it was a combination of two things. So we think that there's an effect of being in a hyperbaric environment or increased pressure that impacts sleep. So, for example, Commander Dituri found that he had increased time in REM. He slept really well down there. And then one of my crewmates for the 6-day mission had a smartwatch that tracked time in REM sleep, and he found it increased time in REM. And you just sleep so well down there because there's no distractions. It's pitch black, and it's the funniest thing is the day after I surfaced, I was in a hotel room I had to go immediately to New Orleans after that. And I was just so confused about where I was because we're in this H-shaped habitat underwater. There's 4 guys. There's me. The guys are on the crew living quarters side. I just would sleep in the kitchen in the galley, and then we just put away my stuff during the day. And so, we have this little bench. There's like the kitchen table, and I put my phone on that at night. So the day after I surfaced, I was so convinced I was still underwater. I kept trying to put my phone in my sleep up on the kitchen table, and it took me so long to realize I was trying to put it on a pillow in a hotel room. So it's like, you sleep so well. Personally, I did, but also I can learn anywhere, or I can sleep anywhere, is what I've learned. There have been times when I've been in 11 time zones in, 3 weeks. So or even in 3 days. So that's one of my less touted skills is being able to sleep anywhere, anytime.
That's so amazing. Is there Wi-Fi in the hab down there?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when we talk about replicating different aspects of the spaceflight environment, well, what kind of spaceflight environment are we trying to replicate? Are we trying to replicate crew living on the International Space Station, in which case it's near instantaneous communications, like we can have a real-time conversation, and that's kind of what we replicated underwater. So we had high-speed internet, which was great for teleconferences, outreach to schools in India, and also helped us with our science and communications. We got to liaise with world-class explorers, astronauts, aquanauts, even rock stars, which was really fun. And then when we talk about longer duration missions, like to the moon, it's a 2.4 second round trip communication delay because of the distance, even traveling at the speed of light. And then if you're talking about a journey to Mars, depending on where Earth and Mars are in their alignment, it can be a 6 to 48 minute round trip delay. So then we need to start thinking about that for Mars. So when we go back to the other simulations I've done at the Mars Desert Research Station, I've been there twice as a commander. I've been also a crew medical officer. And, at those times, we don't, the fidelity of the simulation is what you bring with it. So I don't have any real-time comms. I don't go on social media. Or if I do, I'll post asynchronously. If I'm having communication back home, it'll be a written email to a friend, and then maybe I'll check it, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day. But it's sort of like replicating how isolated are we really.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So you've done all these incredible things. The other thing we didn't mention was you've been to the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
All this amazing stuff. You've been in war zones. You're treating refugees. You're an emergency medicine physician. But at the heart of hearts, you're a human being. You're, here on this earth right now. And we want to know, how did you get here? Because most kids are like, I want to be a fireman, or, for us, I guess it was I guess you checked off the doctor box, but all the other stuff, what, how did that happen?
Yeah, I think it comes back to my upbringing. When I grew up, I was a Girl Guide. We did lots of camping, lots of outdoor stuff, learned how to start a fire, learned how to live in a tent, learned how to build a lean-to. I did outdoor education all throughout junior high. We built a quinzhee, which is like a pile of snow, and then you haul it out and you sleep in it. We built a lean-to, we built our shelter, we go caving, you get muddy. And then as a 14-year-old, you were also creating camp schedules and taking 4 to 6 year olds out for the weekend, and you were responsible for them. So it was part of the normal. And then, I would do a lot of camping with my parents. They would take us out in tents as young as 2, which, good for them for having the courage to go camping with a 2-year-old. That's to me, that's epic. And so, you're just privy to being outdoors. You're privy to these beautiful night skies. We would go on these road trips to Montana and the Pacific Northwest. And it's like, if you have ever seen those night skies, like the Milky Way spiral arm just leaps out at you. And I remember being obsessed as a 10-year-old, just thinking, I want to be out there. And this is when Mariner and Viking landed on Mars. And, there would be new reports coming back from them. And I would see the headlines in USA Today saying micro fossils found on Mars. And I would just, beg my parents to buy it for me. Like, I was obsessed. And then the other part of it is, representation matters, because during this whole period when I was growing up in the 90s, Canada's first female astronaut, Dr. Roberta Bondar, flew to space. And it's like, oh, we can do that. So I was like, okay, she's Canadian. I'm Canadian. She's female. I'm female. She's a Girl Guide. I'm a Girl Guide. So now to be like her, I just need to be a neuroscientist, physician, and then astronaut. Boom, it's done. So it's like, as early as high school, I was like, I'm just going to go study neuroscience. I'm going to be a neurosurgeon, and then I'll be an astronaut. Right? It's like, that's just 3 steps. Maybe there might be some details along the way, but that's what you're going to do. And that's kind of where that passion came from. And amongst, there's other passions that were tied into that. It's like having an impact on humanity, building and working with cool technology. And the coolest part about having these aspirations as a kid is that when you look at where you end up as an adult, it's crazy to think that you can surpass those aspirations in ways you never even imagined.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Along the way, as you were on this journey, right, from a Girl Guide and outdoor, including the voice in your own head, were there any other voices around you, and you don't have to name them if you don't want to, that tried to talk you off your path?
I think there will always be the naysayers, definitely. I think, for example, whether it's kids in school trying to, just knock you down a peg. Like when I was 12, I said I wanted to be director of NASA. And then I just remember one other kid in my class, I think she was trying to knock me down a peg, saying you have to be really smart. And in my head, I'm thinking, I have the top grades in the class, but like, why are you saying that? Like, I guess I never really, I think one of my superpowers is just being naive. I never understand why people are mean. It's like, why would you say that? And like, that's what I'm thinking in my head. And then actually it was really interesting because when I was in 4th year medical school, I was lucky enough to be funded by the Canadian Space Agency to go down to NASA's Johnson Space Center for a month to take part in their aerospace medicine elective. And when the Canadian Space Agency was briefing us on this, they said, okay, and we'll have the CSA astronauts who are down there training come and liaise with you. And like, I was literally thinking to myself, that's so nice of you to say CSA, but they're astronauts. They have better things to do. And my first day in office, the phone rang and I said, yeah, just hold on for a second. I've lost my passport. And then I just realized that the person I put on hold was Lieutenant Colonel, now Colonel Chris Hadfield, who was training to be commander of the International Space Station. And I just put him on hold. And he was just so generous with his time. He was so interested in meeting with us medical students and hearing about our paths. And then I kind of told him about this 12-year-old dream to be a director at NASA. And he's like, you can totally do that. You can do that as a Canadian. No worries. Like he was just so like, if you want to do it, you can do it. Which is really cool to have someone who's just like, obstacles don't matter. They, just do it.
I love it. And I know Chris Hadfield. He's got such a great personality and such a great persona.
Stellar human.
But it's true what you just said. People ahead of you will never put you down. Right. And in that aspect, Colonel Chris Hadfield was ahead of you. And this whole principle of lifting as you climb is so true. And really the naysayers are those and I used to believe this was a cliche, but really the naysayers, by and large, are people that are projecting their own doubts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so true because I've been, reflecting on this recently about, the astronaut mentality. And, prior to this year, I've kind of held back on commenting on what the astronaut mentality is because I haven't yet myself been to space. But, now I'm more happy to talk about it because I work with so many astronauts. They're my collaborators, they're my colleagues, they're folks I have helped send to space and been the lead scientist on the work that they do. And universally, every single one of them, they will just talk to you as if you're on the same level. It's not like they just make you believe that you can be on that level as well. They talk to you as if they're your colleagues. They believe in your intelligence. And it's sort of like you would have no reason to doubt yourself. And that's true of the NASA astronauts, the Canadian Space Agency astronauts, the civilian astronauts. They're friends, they're colleagues, they're collaborators, they're people who want to do amazing things in exploration as ambassadors of humanity. And that is just one of the most inspirational and aspirational facets, I think, of astronautics.
Yeah. I'm still caught on what you said maybe 5 minutes ago because you said it so simply, like, oh, so and so, did this. This is what she did. And all I've got to do is A, B, and C. And so many people spend their lives just on that one thing, right? Like, it really just to me shows like the ability to just see a path and not question it and just take it for face value and go do it, right? You're not then succumbing to the drama of so and so thinks I can, or I think I can't, or maybe there's nobody that looks like me that's doing it, or I have to wonder, that's not a skill most of us have. Do you recall like an event in your life or something to where you really had to cultivate that fast, or were you just naturally having a tendency to, set your sights on something and go for it?
It depends where I was on my life. But, coming back to conversations with Commander Hatfield, I was telling him like how ambitious I was as a kid. And I was like, well, I want to be an astronaut, a billionaire, and a neurosurgeon. And his exact words were, there's no reason you can't be all three. I was like, oh, okay. So it's all easy then. It's that easy. And then, in medical school, there was a time when I wanted to be a surgeon at Stanford. And I had actually emailed the program director of one of the programs I was interested in. And I was like, hey, do you take Canadians? And he was just so nice about it. He's like, well, we've never taken Canadians before, but there's no reason you can't be the first, right? It's just sort of like people who recognize there's hurdles, but like, go be the first, go blaze that trail. And I think it's just, so like having that mentality, people say, okay, yeah, it is hard. We're not negating that, but you clearly have the drive. Be that change, be that change you wish to see. So there's been some really amazing moments like that where it's like, okay, yeah, why not go for that? Why not shoot for the stars?
Mm-hmm.
Seema was asking the question, and when you talked about, following this path, and you said, I'd be a neuroscientist and an astronaut, and it would just be done. I think that's a great way to think about it, and I'm a big fan of that. But along the path, you know, there might have been some setbacks or things like that. Can you share with us an event or a setback that could have thrown you for a loop, but whatever mental fortitude you have or you developed or whatever support system you had was instrumental in quickly sort of derailing that spiral and get you back on the track? And share with our listeners any tips or wisdom how we can create that in our lives.
I actually have an entire TED talk about this because when I matched to neurosurgery, and at the time I was like, this is the only path. And then, I realized it wasn't, and it also wouldn't allow me to have the focus I wanted on space and space medicine, human exploration. And so I moved out of neurosurgery and just not doing what I'd set out to do. And that was so ingrained in my persona as part of my life's journey. That was a devastating blow. And it's like you just feel like a failure for months, if not even like over, a year on end.
Mm-hmm.
And so just having to I would liaise a lot with the postgraduate medical education office, the PGME, about where do I go next. And the one of my advisors, I liken her to a high school guidance counselor. She said, you have to learn to be resilient. And I was like, what does that even mean? And then finally one day I was just so frustrated with all of this. I just Googled it. I read the Wikipedia article. I started to read about psychological resilience. And then I went down this rabbit hole about reading about the most resilient people on Earth. And there's many models out there of what it means to be psychologically resilient, but basically it's that ability to bounce back when things get tough, or even keep going when things are going well, and just maintaining that endurance. And it's a trait that we can learn on how to have that fortitude, that grit, that stick-to-itiveness. And the one that I subscribe to is this model that talks about having good social supports, but also engaging in positive self-talk, telling yourself that you've got this. Breaking things down, not viewing something as a monumental problem, but talking about the next step, resisting that impulse to give up. So impulse control, and then mental preparation. So not just saying visualizing positivity, but talking about the worst case scenarios, and talking about how you prepare yourself for that. And so kind of going through that and just learning to break things down, take things one step at a time, telling myself like, hey, got to dig up. Talking about, engaging my people, my network, all of that was super helpful. And then it's sort of like, even when I'm doing a million things at once, having a go-to pace, the running joke with my schedule is that it's like tour dates will have dropped because I can be in a different city every 3 days for 3 months. It's sort of like, well, how do you maintain that? How do you use those principles of resilience to just keep on the track you want, bounce back when things are suboptimal, and do it in a way that has longevity to it?
Yeah, so good.
We like to bring a little bit more fun into things and give listeners an insight into all the many things that you are. Teach us something, a little quick something that could be what your favorite two color combinations are that look good underwater. I don't know. Just a little life hack, a quick life hack that you've learned through your experiences.
Super quick life hack. This is from my Taekwondo days. I'm a 2nd degree black belt in Taekwondo, and we teach self-defense. So there's 5 principles of self-defense you need to know. If you're in an alley, someone grabs your arm, the principles are you have to shock them so they're no longer thinking about grabbing your arm. So kick them, spit in their face, scream really loudly so they're not focusing on your arm, then break from their arm, retaliate just so they're still stunned, poke them in the eye, punch them in the throat, whatever. Guard, so you're kind of on guard, run away. And then, so those are the 5 principles. So it's shock, break, retaliate, guard, run. If you're a black belt, you should also control the situation. And then my pearl is point number 0 before all of that. Prevent. Don't go into dark alleys. Don't go alone. Don't wear your headphones. Don't wear heels. Don't be on your phone. Prevent all of that. So hopefully that's helpful and a practical life-saving skill.
Yes. I think we all could do well to just be present and walk to our cars without our faces being stuck to our phones. So absolutely helpful.
Yeah, so good. We also like to play a little game called Ask It Forward. And we want to ask you a question that our last guest left. And I think that was Malti, right, Seema?
Yep, it was Malti, who is a wonderful artist here in Austin.
Yeah, she's absolutely terrific, really talented. And the question that Malti left for you, we'll ask it for you, and then you can leave a question for our next guest, is what is something that you did recently that took you out of your comfort zone, and what did it do for you?
Oh gosh. I mean, it's like my everyday one thing that
I was going to say, it's like life. Life is outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, this for you is...
I have one. I had this crazy ER shift recently, and you're focusing on the life-saving stuff. You're focusing, there were a bunch of things that came up recently, and then I had this pediatric patient with an allergic reaction, facial swelling, all of that. I was like, okay, my training knows like how to deal with this. And after I fixed this patient, the thing that I wasn't prepared for is they gave me, I think it was a Switch, and they were playing Minecraft, and they said, "Doctor, I want you to make the next move," and I was like, what do I do with this? And I don't know how real this is. This patient asked me to find the dolphin, and I was like, is that something you can do in Minecraft? So that definitely put me out of my comfort zone. But just the heartwarming joy of having this patient be so back to normal, be so focused on, what a normal kid should be focused on, not breathing, not having allergic reaction, just back to Minecraft. And it was like,
Love it.
this is so human. I love this. So out of my comfort zone, but just so heartwarming.
So
Yes.
good.
Yes.
So good.
Oh my gosh.
What is your question that you'd like to leave for the next guest? And we have no idea who that guest is.
It's just an easy one. It's what makes you happy.
Okay. I love that.
The easiest questions, the simplest questions are the hardest to answer. Right?
Very true. At least I've found that to be true. Okay. So Shawna, at Happy and Human, we believe that generosity is the key to success, and we want to amplify things that matter to you, right? The humanitarian efforts that you mentioned earlier. And we want to let our listeners in the world know about all the wonderful organizations that are doing just that. So in that spirit, what's a nonprofit organization or a cause that you'd like to, the Happy and Human will make a small contribution on your behalf as a thank you for your time today and for being here for our listeners?
Oh gosh, there's so many. Where do I start? We talked about my being in Ukraine on medical deployment, and so one of the organizations I work with, the World Extreme Medicine Organization, has set up a charity called Medics for Ukraine to fund medical supplies. I think Medics for Ukraine would be a good one.
Awesome. Yeah, that's exactly why we do this, so we can learn about different causes that are important. So good. All right, Dr. Pandya, we know your time is valuable. We are grateful that you took a little bit of time out of your day and to spend time with us and to chat. Tell our audience where they can find you, what's coming up for you, what you're excited about, and perhaps I'll leave a little teaser. Perhaps we'll have you back for a part 2 in the near future.
That would be so fun. Thank you so much for having me on. This was a figurative blast. If you want to find me, Shawna Pandya, just my first name, last name, on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. My website is shawnapandya.com. And this year is going to be epic when it comes to space medicine and human spaceflight. So just follow along.